What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks for joining me. Happy Saturday. We don't have the big news yet, at least as I'm recording this. The Aaron Rodgers to the Jets breaking news that I think all of us are waiting for. I will tell you fully transparently, it's just been a really crazy feeling where, like, at any moment, like, news could hit, right? And of course, as somebody who covers the team, covers the Packers, you want to be somebody who knows about it right away and is able to discuss it and get into discourse about it. I'm probably going to do a live episode as soon as it happens. So you want to know that happens. So it like feels like it could happen at any moment, to the point where you're like, all right, can I go do this really quick before, can I get to the store? Can I do something before this breaks? And it's just been that sort of week where you just don't know what the heck is going to happen. And as we get closer and closer to the start of the new league year, we know something's going to happen, right? It feels like we are going to get some update, some major announcement in some capacity. I don't know who breaks it, if it's Rappaport or Schefter or Demovsky or who knows at this point. Probably James Jones, Pat McAfee, those guys certainly in the conversation as well. But some news is coming sooner rather than later. We didn't get that news yet, again, as I'm recording this, but who knows? Like I said, as soon as it hits, as soon as we do know, I will likely be, assuming I'm available, here to do a live episode right away. At least that is my intention. But we did have a ton of other news. It was not a quiet Friday on any front. We didn't get the big news. We didn't get the Rodgers news, but we got a ton of other things. So this is going to be one of those weird episodes where we don't have one specific topic today, but we have lots to go over. So let's go in right away, and let's start with the one and only Mark Murphy. And I think this is probably a level of truth, even though I think the overall commentary on Mark Murphy is a little bit over the top and a little bit probably too harsh. But if we're talking about Mark Murphy, something probably didn't go right, or there's some noteworthy reason why, right? There's usually not a good reason to be talking about Mark Murphy unless we're talking about him holding up a Super Bowl trophy. There's just not many conversations that could start with, we're going to kick things off today with Mark Murphy, and things went extremely well, right? Like just based on the position that he's in more than anything. But we did have quite the Mark Murphy potentially putting his foot in his mouth a little bit on Friday, and we've sort of come accustomed to maybe Mark speaking his mind a little bit too freely, a little bit too easily. And let's just go over the comments first. So Mark Murphy was, I believe, at a high school basketball tournament and was, he gave an interview to Adriana Torres and was talking to some media members. But one of the questions that he was asked is there a scenario where Aaron is still the starting quarterback of the Packers next season? That seems like a fairly reasonable question to ask from any media member. Not anything that Mark Murphy, I'm sure, would not be expecting in that type of interview. And we have seen the Packers so tight-lipped and so cautious with their wording and so careful with anything that they might say about this situation. So for Mark Murphy to respond to that with, yeah, I mean, if things don't work out the way that we want them, yeah, we would. He is obviously a great player. Whew. All right, let's read that one more time. Yeah, I mean, if things don't work out the way we want them, yeah, we would. He is obviously a great player. So unless things don't work out the way we want them, like, he's basically just saying, if we get our way, he is out of here. But if things don't go the way that we want, then yeah, we would. He's a great player. That was massively telling. And if it was just that one comment, you could theoretically chalk it up to, maybe he just slipped up with his wording. That can certainly happen. These are high pressure conversations, and it's easy to maybe slip in a word that you didn't mean here or there. And you could give it the benefit of the doubt if A, this stuff didn't happen before with Mark Murphy, or B, if he didn't follow up a little bit later with another answer to a question that said, quote, very few players play for only one team. And obviously Brett had a great career. Aaron had a great career here. And regardless of what happens, Aaron will be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He'll be in our Hall of Fame, and we'll bring him back and retire his number. But this is just one of the things that you go through as a team. Again, we want to try to achieve something that's good for both Aaron and us. Okay, so let's unpack that whole thing, because he literally said Aaron had a great career here. That is beyond telling. And then we fast forward to him basically talking about, we'll bring him back at some point to retire his number, Packer Hall of Fame, and all of that sort of stuff, right? This is as much of an admission as we have gotten through this entire process, through all the thinly veiled comments, all the cookie crumbs that we've had to sort through, all the tea leaves that we've had to read. This just came out and said it. They want to move forward with Jordan Love. They are talking about Aaron Rodgers in the past tense. And yeah, maybe they're trying to slip in every once in a while that, yeah, maybe things, if they don't work out the way that we want, he's obviously a great player. He did mention that they want a win-win for both sides, but this was as telling as you could possibly get. And if the Brian Gutekunst press conference, which basically spelled it out, and I talked about it immediately after it happened, and Tom Silverstein had basically the exact same article that he took away from it exactly after it happened. The Brian Gutekunst press conference all but said, we want to move forward with Jordan, without specifically saying we want to move forward with Jordan. It was as clear as day, right? He didn't say it, but he didn't need to if you really read between the lines and knew exactly what he was trying to say. This was not that. This was as clear as it could possibly be. Aaron had a great career here. So this is the president of the team, who is the ultimate decision maker, who is already talking about Aaron in the past tense. One other noteworthy piece of news that came from that Mark Murphy interaction is that he did also mention that the Jets are the only team that received permission to speak with Aaron Rodgers. So there are no other teams who are granted permission to speak with Aaron or his agent or anyone in close contact with Aaron. That would be tampering if any other team did it. So it's only the Jets at this point that have that permission. So what does this ultimately mean? Now, I think the easiest takeaway here is that clearly Green Bay wants to move on. And then I saw people online being like, Andy, didn't we know this already? Yes, I very much believe that we did know this kind of already, but the Packers have not said it. They have not. They've been very veiled. They've been very secretive. They've kept everything close to the vest. And this was not. This is the first time that we heard somebody from within the Packers organization talk about Aaron in this capacity, that basically they want to go in another direction. They talked about him in the past tense. This was a little bit different. So clearly, to me, this means that they want Aaron gone. And like I said, we kind of knew that they want to move forward with Jordan, that Jordan is their guy, and that they're working to find a way to make this deal work with Aaron and the Jets so that it can be sort of amicable for all sides. Clearly, and here's what I've kind of been saying for the past week, right? The Jets very clearly want Aaron Rodgers, all right? The Packers very clearly want the Jets to have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I believe, wants to play football. The question remains, does he want to play football enough that he's going to do it for another team? And does he want to play for the New York Jets? It feels to me that those are the main two questions that still have yet to be figured out, with maybe some contractual stuff and maybe some compensation stuff mixed in there to make this just enough, complicated enough where there's an unknown to this as we're going about this right now. So that's what this means, right? That it's very clear as day that this is on pace to try to get done, and it probably is mostly up to Aaron Rodgers at this point. And then the next question ultimately becomes, did Mark Murphy make some big blunder, mistake, error in talking about this at this specific time? That's a tough question to answer, but I do think that there is a little bit of, why are you saying this? There's really no advantage to saying these comments at this time. And for maybe somebody who would oppose that point of view and say, Andy, it really doesn't matter because compensation is probably worked out anyway. So if Mark Murphy said something at this point, he's probably pretty certain that, comp's already been agreed upon or whatever. That doesn't mean the deal is signed, sealed, and delivered. It doesn't mean that it's done. And there are two things that maybe the Jets knew from this, right? Maybe the Jets knew already, and I think probably they knew already. But the two big takeaways are that the Jets are the only team that have permission, which is a huge tell to the New York Jets that says, hey, it's you that are the team that's trying to trade for him. Aaron's not talking to anyone else. You don't say that. And like I said, the Jets probably know that. I would be willing to bet that they know that. But still, what's the advantage of saying it at that point, right? The second is that for the first time, it became abundantly clear that Green Bay does not want to move forward with Aaron Rodgers publicly. This is the first time we've really heard this. And the huge thing all along, and I've defended Green Bay, to this point by saying there's a reason that they've kept this close to the vest. Because if you do get in this scenario where it is only the Jets, there is no other team that Aaron is talking to. If you do get in that scenario, you want to have plausible deniability with the Jets that you will keep him, that you're just going to keep Aaron and move forward next season. Hey, you are going to lowball us with some crazy day 3 offer. All right, we'll just keep him. That's what they've been trying to sell to the Jets this entire time. That's what they've been trying to get out of this, is a little bit more leverage and a little bit more opportunity to gain additional draft capital or just capital in general off of this Aaron Rodgers trade. Because if you were going to do this and just say all along that you don't want to move forward with Aaron Rodgers, then just say it. Because I think the biggest thing here is there is a power for your organization in, instead of making it come across as, hey, we're going to do what Aaron wants to do. That's very passive. That is very, that's not you taking the situation and dictating, right? And when you are talking about a team and a franchise that is going to be looked at differently now if Aaron Rodgers is not the quarterback, right? I remember with that transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, one of the things that struck me was as how the organization as a whole, it was never like really anti-Aaron Rodgers. There was obviously some vitriol and some back and forth that ended up happening, but at the beginning, it was no anti-Brett Favre. Excuse me, I may have said Rodgers. There's no anti-Brett Favre. It was all pro-Aaron Rodgers. And it was from like everyone. The wide receivers were constantly talking how good Aaron was in practice, leading up to this. And the Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy, it wasn't, we want to get rid of Brett. It was all like, we are moving forward with Aaron. Aaron is our guy. And you could tell this entire organization was very much, and I'm sure there were dissenters. I'm sure there were many people who wanted Brett to come back, but the messaging, the organization as a whole was excited for and ready to move forward with Aaron Rodgers. And right now, while we have heard some of those things from Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy and Matt LaFleur that they are excited about Jordan, we've heard it from some of the players as well. It hasn't come from the organization from an action standpoint, meaning if you start the offseason saying, we are moving forward with Jordan Love, he is our guy, this is his team now, and we could not be more excited about it, and you make that a unifying call from your front office, from your team, from everyone, that just sends a different message to Jordan. It sends a different message to the rest of your roster. It sends a different message to those who might want to sign with Green Bay on some free agent deal, because there will be many who are like, oh, Aaron's gone? Well, I'll wait and see to see how Jordan Love does before I have any interest in maybe signing over there. That could be a really rough situation. But if everyone's like, if you're a free agent here, everyone's just talking and glowingly about Jordan, so much so that they got rid of Aaron Rodgers because they're so excited to go to Jordan, that has some value in it. And again, overall, I actually, for the most part, agree with kind of the stance that they took and just being like, kind of playing things close to the vest and not taking a hard stance on it. But if you get to this point and the trade isn't even completed yet, and now you're going to say the obvious and basically undercut what you've done this entire offseason, yeah, that's probably not the best case scenario. And I think the big thing here, and that I'll say one more time, is ultimately, do I think that Murphy saying this is anything over egregious or anything? I don't think this is ultimately alters things all that much. But I don't think you gained any advantage from it. You absolutely did not gain any advantage from it. The Jets now for sure know they're the only team. The Jets now for sure know that the Packers have really no interest in bringing back Aaron Rodgers. That undercuts your trade negotiations with them significantly. And if something does come up now where the trade falls through with the Jets, maybe they figure out something different, wanted to go in a different direction, and now you need to pivot, and you now end up in a situation where Aaron wants to come back and you don't have a great trade partner, now you've got some awkwardness there too, where now you've said the quiet part out loud and saying, yeah, we want to move on from Aaron and Jordan's our guy. So I don't think you had any positives come out of this interview from Mark Murphy. And this has been a bit of an issue. Public speaking for him has not been his forte. It just hasn't. And I think if you're going to have one thing that maybe isn't the best in his resume or whatever, then whatever, it's not a huge deal. But when you get in these situations, from the complicated fella to the, like, there's just been these very odd moments where he gets in front of a microphone and just stuff comes out. Like, when you've had a concerted effort as an organization to be so tight-lipped on this from day one, to let it out now just seemed very, very odd. So, like I said, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't know how much it changes, but it certainly doesn't put Green Bay on a better standpoint from leverage. It certainly doesn't put you on a better pedestal with Aaron Rodgers if somehow he does end up coming back. It was a very weird interview and very weird comments from a president who should probably know better and should probably have just said exactly what Brian Gutekunst has been saying up until this point. And if you're Brian Gutekunst, what are you thinking, right? Like, I just went through 3 press conferences from before the end of the season to after the end of the season to the scouting combine of almost masterfully maneuvering around this question. And then Murphy has one interview and just all of that right down the, like, I could have done that at the end of the season and just said, we want to move forward with Jordan. That would have been a lot easier, right? Same thing with Matt LaFleur. So I'm sure that there are some in the front office who are probably not too happy with how that interview went down, but whether it affects anything, ultimately tough to say. Just a very odd way to go about his Friday afternoon and phrasing exactly how he did. And it just, like I said, very, very interesting. All right, let's get to the next key point, because we had another major news piece on Friday, and that was David Bakhtiari, who restructured his contract officially. I should say this, and this is a very key note here, the Packers restructured his contract. And the reason I say that is there were no void years added to this deal, which is a huge deal. And the reason I say that it's a huge deal is because A, there's less savings. They could have saved up to almost $12+ million in salary cap space if they used void years, where now they only saved $7.5 million. So it's a difference of about $4.5 million that they did not save because they did not use void years. And the huge thing there is, in order to use void years, you have to work with the player. The player has to go along with it. And this is not something that Bakhtiari, for whatever reason, has wanted to go along with, which is a very interesting situation. And I do think that is of note. The bigger thing here is this is extremely complicated to go over, because I would very much argue that your best case scenario with a David Bakhtiari, who has had some major knee issues, is to not touch his contract at all. Because before this restructure, you basically went into 2024 with the ability to get off of his contract if something happened. If he had a setback, if whatever the case may be, you had the ability to get off of his contract. Now, they just simply needed the money. And so doing a simple restructure was basically always going to happen. But there is benefit in not doing the void year restructure, because it doesn't kick as much money out and it doesn't put as much of a burden on you in the future. So I would argue that this is actually a good thing for a player that is a little bit up there in age and coming off some major injury issues. And if I thought that that was Green Bay's prerogative, if I thought Green Bay wanted to be extra cautious with David Bakhtiari and therefore didn't want to use the extra void years, I would say that makes a lot of sense, and that's actually very smart. The issue is that every move that they have made up until this point has screamed, we are trying to do whatever we can to open up as much salary cap space as possible, which in this case would be using void years. And we also know that Bakhtiari has not wanted to do this in the past for whatever reason, and it seems like he probably didn't want to do this again. I can't report on that. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but if I were willing to bet, I would very much bet that this was probably a Bakhtiari decision and not a Packers decision. So it's this weird situation where I don't think the Packers really got what they wanted. And for some reason, Bakhtiari doesn't seem to want to do this, but I actually think it's probably best, based on his injury history and his age, that the Packers didn't even commit more money into the future. That was guaranteed money for a player who has this major injury history. So it is very, very complicated in that regard. And it just means that Green Bay is going to be a little bit more tight. That $4.5 million would have been very important, especially if they are wanting to take on more of Aaron Rodgers' deal to try to facilitate the trade. and maybe get more in return from the Jets because they took on more of the contract. If they wanted to do anything like that, that's $4.5 million less that they can take on because Bakhtiari didn't want to restructure his contract. So there is some interesting decisions and determinations that were made there. What ultimately happened, we don't know yet. But I would be willing to bet for some reason Bakhtiari didn't want to use those void years and the Packers were stuck only being able to get $7.5 million savings instead of $12 million savings. Now, the next question obviously became, all right, does that solidify David Bakhtiari on the Packers in 2023, or could he still be traded? And the answer is also complicated. I would be willing to bet you once again that this means that David Bakhtiari will be a Green Bay Packer in 2023. I think this is by far and away the most likely outcome and scenario is that he is on the team this upcoming season with this contract getting restructured the way that it was. However, he does actually become much more attractive to teams that would be looking to acquire him, like the New York Jets, because now his base salary is much, much, much lower. And his signing bonus is much, much, much higher. So why is that beneficial for a team like the New York Jets? Because they take on far less salary. They only take on the base salaries. All the bonus money, the signing bonus money that Green Bay just used to restructure him, that all stays on Green Bay's cap. So he's actually more attractive to any team that would acquire him, and Green Bay could now probably get more compensation in return because they did this restructure. However, the bad news is if you wanted to trade him, the good news is if you didn't want to trade him, is that all of that money accelerates into this year's salary cap if you trade him now. And they cannot do that in any way. So that kills it, right? Except it doesn't. It kills it now. There's a possibility that they could trade him post June 1st. Then at that point, those salary cap hits split between this year and next year, and now it mostly goes into next year's salary cap. So Green Bay very much could trade him post June 1st, and his contract just became extremely more palatable to a team that would be looking to actually acquire his services. That being said, now the team has to wait till June 1st. Now Green Bay has to wait until after the draft and free agency. Could there still be a team that is looking to acquire him at that point? Yes, but I just think it's very unlikely that it happens. And I'm sure Green Bay would like to have a really nice offensive line for Jordan Love if that does come to fruition. And I do think that having Bakhtiari there does make some sense. And if the Jets are going to trade for him, they probably would want to do it prior to June 1st, probably alongside Aaron Rodgers. And at this point, that just cannot happen. And that's probably good to make the deal less complicated. But it's just, like I said, if Green Bay wants to trade him, it's going to have to be after June 1st. And we can wait and see. But if I were, like I said, if I were betting, I would very much think that this means that Bakhtiari is not likely to be traded in 2023. All right, other news, Rich Bisaccia officially promoted to assistant head coach. We had not really heard any potential rumors of that, but he goes from special teams coordinator to assistant head coach and special teams coordinator. So he gets a bump in his title, probably in salary as well. Meanwhile, on the defensive back side, we knew that Greg Williams was going to be hired as some sort of defensive backs coach. It was rumored that he was going to be the defensive backs coach and the passing game coordinator. Turns out he is just the defensive passing game coordinator, and Ryan Downard was actually promoted to defensive backs coach from safeties coach. So Ryan Downard gets, the complete autonomy over the secondary, and Greg Williams becomes the defensive passing game coordinator. Now, this is not Greg Williams with 2 G's, not the Bounty Gate former defensive coordinator. This is a younger defensive backs coach coming over from the Arizona Cardinals. And again, he takes over as the defensive passing game coordinator and not any sort of defensive backs or cornerbacks coach title as of this time. Meanwhile, Jason Rebrovich gets promoted to pass rush specialist. Tim Lester, Ryan Grosso, and Kyle Wilbur officially hired to the staff. And maybe one of the biggest pieces of news from the coaching staff officially being announced for Green Bay is that Tom Clements is back. A couple questions that come out of that. A, does that mean Aaron is more likely to be back? I don't think so. I don't think that really has anything to do with it. And then B, I just think that's a huge development for Jordan Love. I don't think it is happenstance that Jordan Love had his biggest sort of jump in his career when Tom Clements came on board. And remember, when Aaron was asked who he thought would be the best quarterbacks coach for this past season, when they asked for Aaron's input, now I'm sure he wanted Tom for himself as well, but he said he thought Tom would be amazing for Jordan Love. That, with how Tom helped Aaron in his development at that stage of his career, he thought Tom could do the exact same thing for Jordan Love. And I think we saw some of that in Jordan's development last year. Meanwhile, for Tom to get up and relocate to whatever team Aaron goes to, I don't know that that was always going to really happen, but I just don't know that there's that much more that Aaron can learn from Tom at this point, right? I'm sure there's a lot of things that those two throw off of each other and there's a synergy there, but I don't know that. I'm sure Aaron has the entire Tom Clements, coaching guidebook down at this point and could probably instruct the class on his own. So Aaron getting a new quarterbacks coach with whatever team that he's on probably makes sense. And Tom sticking with Jordan Love, I actually think is a sneaky huge win for this Packers franchise and more importantly for Jordan Love. So I think that is actually a really huge development that, again, I think kind of went a little bit under the radar for the Packers. But Tom Clements back as quarterbacks coach, likely with Jordan Love at the helm. All right, we also had the Bears make a major trade. If you were wondering, there's going to be a major NFC North trade involving, basically a quarterback, even though it's not a quarterback that was involved in the trade. The number one pick is a quarterback, right? So you told me there was a number one pick or a major trade involved from the NFC North on Friday. Was not expecting the Chicago Bears to be the team that did it. But the Bears trade the number one overall pick to the Panthers. In return, the Bears get quite the haul. They get pick 9 in this year's draft, pick 61 in this year's draft, a 2024 first round pick, a 2025 second round pick, and DJ Moore. And let me say this first of all, the Bears got a very, very good deal here. I don't think there's anyone that's saying like, man, look at the Bears. They got fleeced in this deal. I don't think there's anyone saying that. In fact, I think most people are saying that the Bears got by far the better part of this than what the Panthers did. That being said, when you told me they went when I saw that they moved from pick 1 to pick 9, I was actually kind of expecting a little bit more, only because there are so many teams that are wanting young quarterbacks and are going to want to go get their guy. And the Bears probably could have moved down to number 2. They probably could have moved down to number 4. They maybe could have moved down with other teams as well. So to move all the way down to number 9 from number 1, one of the big things I thought Chicago would get from this would be 3 first-round picks, meaning their first this year, number 9, a first next year in 2024, which they did get, and then a first in 2025. And if you're thinking of this from a Bears standpoint, right, you're trading the Bears the number 1 overall pick. They're going to take, or you're trading the Panthers the number 1 overall pick. They're going to take a quarterback. There's no guarantee that that team is good the next 2 years. Those could be 2 top 5 picks over the next 2 seasons, right? Like that is not outside of the realm of possibility. So if I'm the Bears, I would have really wanted those 3 first-round picks because those are massive, massive lottery tickets, at least the 2024 and 2025. You know what you're getting at pick 9. That being said, not getting the 2025 first, getting the 2025 second, and in the meantime, getting this year's second, and also getting DJ Moore, which is clearly something they very much wanted, I think is a really good haul. And basically, DJ Moore is worth a first-round pick in and of himself at this point. And here's what I would also say, and I think this is a really good point to think of if you're from a Bears point of view, is DJ Moore is better than any free agent wide receiver that's available, and probably better than any draft pick wide receiver that's available, any wide receiver that's available in the draft. That's how good DJ Moore is, in my opinion. Now, him and Justin Fields developing a chemistry is going to be huge, but DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool as a 3 wide receiver core to start off with, Velus Jones as your 4, and then I think you still got Equanimeous St. Brown there. I think he signed an extension. I could be wrong on that. Cole Kmet at tight end, and then pretty good stable of running backs, specifically with Khalil Herbert being still young and super talented. Like that is a good core. They're going to go out and get offensive line in the draft. Braxton Jones was really good last year. Like that is a very interesting offense, very, very quick. And they still have a lot of draft capital over the next couple seasons. So pretty big haul. Meanwhile, it looks like the Carolina Panthers are probably going to take CJ Stroud, which is the number 1 guy on my board. And I think is sort of the sneaky guy where I think everyone falls in love with Richardson's, just insane athleticism. And then you look at, Will Levis, I don't think was ever really in that conversation, right? And then you got Bryce Young, who was this dynamic player, but a little bit shorter, but that's the guy everyone's been talking about. I think Stroud just kind of got lost in the shuffle and was kind of like the just hiding in plain sight. And I think there was a little bit of I hesitate to use his name because, just the situation he's been through. But when Deshaun Watson got sort of overlooked in his draft, right? And he ends up going further down, and Trubisky goes before him, and obviously Mahomes goes, I think Mahomes, I forget which order they went in. It doesn't matter. The point being is that Watson immediately came in and was so freaking talented from day one. To me, that was going to be CJ Stroud in this draft. Is everyone just wanted to pick apart his game, and in the meantime, you just watch him play, and you're like, he's got everything he needs to be insanely successful. I think that's CJ Stroud in this draft. I think he's going to go on to have a fantastic career, and I think this is a really interesting deal for the Carolina Panthers. And Stroud makes a lot of sense to me, just based on who he is as a quarterback, and that's going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on over the course of the next few seasons, but a ton to give up to the Chicago Bears. And Bears now have a ton of salary space, a ton of ammunition from a draft capital standpoint. They are going to be in a very interesting position, rebuilding that team from scratch and really being able to build it in Ryan Poles' image. Meanwhile, still no Aaron Rodgers trade. That's going to happen sooner rather than later. And of course, I'll be right here to cover it as soon as it happens. And last but not least, the NFL Network was doing a bunch of Aaron Rodgers games, and it happened to be the Packers-Steelers Super Bowl. And I was watching it. I watched almost all the second half, and it hit different. It was the first time I watched in a while. And first of all, hearing the call right after the final kneel down of the Green Bay Packers are your new Super Bowl champions was, still goosebumps, right? And you just got to find a way to get back there because it's so magical. But seeing Ted Thompson hold that trophy and seeing Bart Starr watching from the box seats just hit different, watching it this time. And obviously both of those, two men have passed away. And just kind of seeing it in that light, like I said, it just hit a little bit different. And yeah, Ted was amazing at what he did for a long period of time in building that team into a Super Bowl champion. And of course, Bart Starr, Mr. Green Bay Packer. He just was player, coach, and, just ambassador of the game, ambassador of the Green Bay Packers. When you think Green Bay Packers, you should think Bart Starr. That's the name that should come to mind, in my opinion. And to see him watching as just with pure joy as the Green Bay Packers are celebrating the Super Bowl. And like I said, talking about this the other day, but Thompson and Mike McCarthy, and of course Aaron Rodgers up there at that podium after what they went through, making that decision. Like I said, it hits every single time. And I'm just very hopeful that if Green Bay does go in this direction, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, and Jordan Love can have that same moment. It'd be pretty freaking awesome. They have a long way to go. They have a ton of work to do. This is a roster that is filling up with holes, and they don't have a lot of money to spend to fix it. They are behind the eight ball from a salary cap standpoint. Jordan Love has yet to, really become there. He started a game, but not in ideal circumstances, right? And, Matt LaFleur has a lot to prove without Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. So this is a group that has a long way to go, but we can dream, right? And seeing Jordan Love, Brian Gutekunst, and Matt LaFleur have that moment would be pretty freaking magical. We'll see. Like I said, a long, long way to go until we're at that point. Thanks so much for joining me on this Saturday. So much going on. Like I said, as soon as news breaks, I will have it right here on Pack-A-Day. So check that out on YouTube whenever the news does happen. As soon as I'm available, I will be live here on YouTube. So like I said, check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and until that happens, go Pack, go.